Okay, I think I'm going to go ahead and get us started. Good afternoon from Glasgow. Good morning to everyone back at home in Los Angeles. My name is Lauren Faber O'Connor. I'm Mayor Garcetti's Chief Sustainability Officer, and we're so excited to be able to come back and patch into you all in Los Angeles right now. Thank you so much to LABC, to Mary for organizing this conversation, and to President Folt for being here, and of course our good friend Tianna Shaw-Wakeman, a alum of USC and alum of the Mayor's Youth Council for Climate Action. We're really excited to be able to chat about what we've been up to and what's going on here in Glasgow. This has been a really important milestone, I think, for Mayor Garcetti, for the city of Los Angeles, and for cities all over the world to really be recognized as key members of the overall efforts, the global efforts to fight climate change and really ensure that we're maintaining our commitment to a climate safe world, which means needing to, and the theme that is incredibly dominant here in Glasgow is ensuring that all nations are laying out on the table their commitments to keep global warming to no more than 1.5 degrees Celsius. And we've got the mayor here who needs no introduction from me, but sir, I was just explaining to folks how excited we've been to be here, and the kind of overall theme of making sure all nations and all actors are putting down their science-based commitments to keep global warming below 1.5 degrees Celsius, and everything that you've been doing to demonstrate our part of how cities are showing up in force. So why don't I turn it over to you?
All right, awesome. Thank you, Lauren. Great to be with everybody. We miss you out in LA, and I hope you all are doing well. You can see behind me, beautiful Glasgow. We had at least an hour of sunlight today, so I'm told that is a lot here in Scotland. But a couple things I just wanted to say. Thank you, first of all, to Los Angeles Business Council, to Mary Leslie, to all of the leaders who have been for so long making sure Los Angeles leads. And as chair of C40 Cities for one more month, and I'm so excited to hand over my chairmanship after 2 years to London Mayor Sadiq Khan, an extraordinary leader and great climate activist. We come to Glasgow strong because Los Angeles leads, first and foremost. But second, in a time of, I think, a lot of immense despair, cities come here with a message of intense hope. And rightfully so, people around the world are asking, what is this COP really going to do? Is this more pledges that people won't even make, or if they do make them, they won't implement? Is this just a huge gathering of people to pat themselves on the back? Or can we get from the what to the how? Can we get from the aspirations to the measurable? And for me, I'm so excited to bring that hope, because I think cities, more than any other sector or any other level of government, are able to embody that, not in a way to shame others or to feel better, but to inspire them to be a part of the same sort of difficult decisions, the bold actions, and ultimately the progress forward that we embody. So for the uninitiated, C40 is the 97 largest cities of the world. We represent about 700 million global residents and a quarter of the world's GDP. So if we were a nation here, we'd be one of the top 4 or 5. That said, when I knew the COP was happening, I knew that even the 97 megacities of the world couldn't do enough on their own. And so I established a stretch goal, joined with the United Nations Race to Zero, to launch Cities Race to Zero. And we reached out to all the other city organizations that are out there, some of which represent very small villages and towns and medium-sized cities all around the world. Organizations like ICLEI and the Global Covenant of Mayors, folks like WWF and the World Resources Institute, UCLG. And each one of these came together and said, yes, we'll help you. And we didn't know if we'd get there, but last week, we were able to get over the mark of what our goal was. And I announced on the stage where the world leaders spoke from. And in previous COPs, nobody but world leaders has spoken on the world leaders stage, but they let 3 of us, a youth activist, the head of Race to Zero from the United Nations, Nigel Topping, and myself speak. And what I said in the last speech of the first day was that we had heard from heads of government, but we come as proof with 1,049 cities who have signed on to actionable plans, already taken steps forward to cut our emissions in half by 2030 at a minimum and to be at 2050 net zero. And when I said that people don't believe that it's real, I said, if you don't think you can fully electrify your bus fleet, and certainly we hear that sometimes even in LA from folks, as we're doing that with Metro and as we've built the biggest orders of electric buses in the country through LA's Dash system, we point to Shenzhen, where it's already happened. Over 10,000 buses and taxis that are electric. If you don't believe you can clean up the air in your urban center, I say look to London, where their ultra low emissions zone, something I think we can learn quite a bit from, has cut air pollution in half. And now Mayor Khan is going to expand that 18-fold. If you don't think you can get to 100% renewable power, what we bring from LA is LA 100, the boldest, most detailed study for a city in the history of humanity to bring us to 97% carbon-free electricity generation by the end of this decade, and by 2035, fully 100% renewable power, partnering with our laboratory, the National Renewable Energy Laboratory. So my message was simple. We're delivering. We have the proof points. We know we can do this, and be courageous. You will always be criticized, but go beyond what you think you can do. And whether it's in Bogota, where we're seeing 1,000 buses already purchased there, or whether we're looking at building the 15-minute city from Paris to Buenos Aires, whether it's the work that we're seeing where national leaders are helping fund local innovation around building codes and building electrification, cities are delivering and LA is leading. I have to say, I see this through the eyes of my daughter, Maya, and it's one of my proudest moments when I was backstage before I went on, thinking, will she ask me years from now, Daddy, what did you do? And I'll say, I was there in Glasgow. I traveled halfway around the world on no sleep to come here to deliver the biggest non-state pledge in this COP and to push national leaders, not through shame, but through inspiration, because cities make up nations. Half of our global citizens live in cities and soon 2/3 of them. So if cities can make it, we all can make it. And thank you all for helping me ensure that LA is leading that amazing group of cities, and that I, as leader of C40, was able to represent Los Angeles well, bring ideas back to LA from Glasgow, but most importantly, to leave LA's legacy here to inspire the nations of the world to address this code red. So with that, I'm happy to answer questions. Want to thank you for having me. And I look forward to answering anything that you want to talk about and hearing here from Glasgow, hopefully some rays of hope.
Well, thank you, Mayor. I'll just begin since we're a little bit out of order. And I just want to say congratulations on achieving that commitment of 1,049 cities. And I was going to point out in my remarks to you in the introduction of you, why it's possible for you to get this commitment, because most people don't realize that a decade ago, the Department of Water and Power, our water and utility, was the dirtiest municipal utility in America. Okay, that's not a great distinction to have, but it's a true one, right? We were over 60% coal and gas dependent. And I think the fact that under your leadership, we were able to turn that around in 10 years. And now Department of Water and Power is leading, I believe, in this region and in our state and in our country with our goal by 2035. And I can't not point out the fact that you also supported both local and large-scale solar, making us the #1 solar city in at least the US. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know about the world. Germany may still have a few points on us, but anyway, and I think all of this means that we know how important the local community is, the local stakeholders are, that all these goals getting set at COP26 only happen when you can pull it off in your city or in your neighborhood, right? So I guess what I'm wondering is, how does it feel there? Do you feel like countries that need more support are going to get it, and that the countries that have the power are serious about actually getting to, as Lauren said, trying to keep us at 1.5 degrees?
I think there's a lot of good news and there's a lot of bad news. I think that, let me start with the bad news. You see a lot of countries whose heads of state aren't even here, heads of government. You see, but not many, but some important ones. You see some folks whose ambitions may take too long or are too timid. You have, I think, a lot of promises, which are fine, but I think if we haven't even lived up to the promises of Paris, and let me just give you this statistic, Mary, there's only one country on track to meet the commitments to Paris. It's the Gambia, a small country in Africa. And yet, if you look at the 97 cities of C40, over 2/3 of us are on track to meet or exceed the Paris commitments. And again, we don't say that to shame our government or anybody else's, but to inspire them, saying, look, if cities can do it where we actually have to do the implementation, not just the pledging and the funding, you can too. So the negatives are that sometimes it doesn't seem bold enough. But as one key player, one high-ranking American official told me, the fun begins when the leaders leave. So they come and give the speech for the first couple of days. Then the real negotiation begins. And in many ways, those opening speeches may be just the negotiating salvos. They say, oh, you want us to go faster? Well, provide us the funding, which is a fair thing for the developing world to say. We found $13 trillion to respond to COVID in a year and a half. And the commitment to fund the Global South at $100 billion a year, which was made a few years back, still hasn't even been met. So don't tell me we can't do this. So that's really, I think, where it's going to be interesting. On the flip side, the youth component here is amazing. Kevin Patel, who's a member of our youth council, we met with in London. I saw him out here on BBC, right next to Greta Thunberg. We see the civic sector, the business sector really stepping up sometimes more aggressively than even governments. And then you see certain countries where they absolutely are knocking it out of the park. To see the United Arab Emirates make a commitment as a gas-based, oil-based, Gulf country to 100% renewable really sets the standard. When you see Denmark, where we brought Denmark together, and we didn't just work with Copenhagen, but Copenhagen brought that pledge to 96 of the 98 cities. So I don't know who those two outliers are, but almost every city in Denmark, from the smallest to the biggest, now has a framework, transparency, and accountability to get to net zero. And they're pushing it along, inspiring other places that it's not just the big mega cities. So I think on balance, I'm personally very inspired, but I also, like many activists, want to see something get delivered at the end of this that is more than talk, but actually is something that will produce results.
And you know what's so exciting? Actually, well, Dr. Folt, I was actually just going to turn it over to you.
Well, what I was thinking is, first I want to say hello. It's so great to see you. I'm so inspired by what I'm reading in the paper every day, these amazing things that people are saying. And, Mayor, we've talked before about the impatience and the urgency. I think I've shared with you that I started working on climate change back in the 90s. And like so many of us, I'm sitting here going, we did all this great stuff, but what the heck? How could it be this much later? And we're still working so hard. And so clearly, we need a new playbook. We need to start over and think about new ways to do it. But before I ask my own question, I thought I would introduce Tianna Shaw-Wakeman because she is the example to me of the best that I can do as a university president is find a way to listen to these incredible students who are out here. She was a champion and still is of the environment and almost everything else progressive and far-reaching at the university, because I think this is things that Mayor, you and I have talked about. How do we get these young students? Well, not that. How do we get them energized? They're energized. How do we listen to them? So why don't I turn it over to Tianna, and then I'll have a chance later to come back and ask a question.
Thank you, Dr. Folt. Great to see you, Tianna.
Good to see you. Thank you so much, Mayor Garcetti, for your leadership at Cop26, and thank you so much, Dr. Folt, for your kind introduction. In regard to the role of youth in climate action, I really believe that people like myself kind of play a role that falls into two larger buckets. The first is really about hope and inspiration and also inclusion. In public discourse, I'm personally thrilled to say that what I think many deem to be inspiring about youth activists is kind of our central message, the message that climate change is the largest existential threat to the future, so all governments must take urgent and aggressive action to avert the climate crisis, and that they must do so collaboratively while thinking about the world's most vulnerable. But to me, it's not just the message that's inspiring. What also makes me proud and hopeful is that many of the youth leaders today became climate activists at a time when climate change wasn't really a main topic on the world stage, when caring about climate change was more, what many would say, fringe, and oftentimes many came from communities that were left out of decision making. So if youth activists around the world can blossom and inspire and be effectual in environments that weren't actually initially conducive for that to happen, then what's inspiring, along with our message, is that we now have a group of really resilient youth climate activists who have helped create a world where more and more young people can feel comfortable and excited to become involved in climate action. A world where topics like sustainability and environmentalism and climate change aren't solely reserved for the politicians, business executives, or academics. One with inclusion where everyone can feel welcome to have and to assert their voice. Now, kind of beyond the hope and inclusion and inspiration, as important as that is, youth also do the work. In LA, there's so many examples of youth climate activists who have acted as change makers. For instance, Carlos Regalado, who I got to know on the Mayor's Youth Council for Climate Action last year, worked with Performa Beautiful and led the No Gas LA campaign, calling for the closure of the Valley Generating Station, which led to LA County voting to create a timeline to shut it down. And through that work, we created a LA Climate Stories project, where many more youth tell the stories of the work that they've done in their communities. And then there's even me. I worked with an amazing partner, Nathaniel Hyman, on an initiative calling on my now alma mater, USC, to divest endowment holdings from fossil fuels. And they put out a commitment to do so in February of this year. So youth inspire, provide hope, create inclusion, and actively work to make our world more sustainable. Yep. So if I do say so myself, I think we play quite an important role in climate action, which is why I'm excited to see how youth activists will be continually invited to play a role in climate negotiations at Cop26, and then during implementation afterwards. Because really, when there's meaningful collaboration between governments and their youth activists, incredible, equitable change comes, which kind of leads me into my question to you, Mayor Garcetti. With youth being the inheritors of what is or is not accomplished at COP26, how can governments effectively engage with young climate leaders to ensure the ideas of youth are heard and are implemented?
Well, thank you, Tianna. You articulated it better than I could. Just really where I used to say fuel, but now I'll say the volts, since we do a lot of electric car charging for this movement, for this vehicle comes from. And youth, when I was your age, I always hated hearing you're the leaders of tomorrow. BS, you're the leaders of today. You have the equal standing. You have the place at the table, maybe even a bigger place at the table as the inheritors of what will be left behind. So, it was so inspiring to me that the United Nations, which had never invited anybody but world leaders to that stage, not only had cities there through me, but had Shie Bastia, who is a college sophomore, who's indigenous Mexican and Chilean, who goes to school now in the United States, whose parents met at the first COP in Rio. And so she's literally been produced out of the COPs, but became a youth activist alongside Al Gore and others, and was given that stage to speak to the heads of government of every government in the world. And to me, whether it was Greta and Kevin outside or whether it was Shie inside, it's that inside-outside strategy that youth will continue, I think, to navigate seamlessly, because we need the street and we need the march and we need the yelling. We need the kind of primal cry for really what Code Red means. But you can't just stay on the street. You have to cross the street, come in, sit down, negotiate, help, become the nuanced negotiators, understand the technical stuff, not just saying it's possible. Even when things are technologically possible, you have to fund them. You have to see what the technological hiccups are going to be. And I think, one of the ways I've tried to do this as chair of C40, you embody, creating a mayor's youth council. We now move that, and the mayor of Bogota, Mayor Lopez, she chairs within C40 the youth movement, so that every single C40 mayor, we are helping create youth councils and youth representatives. In fact, we had a Zoom call just a couple months ago, and we're doing them regularly with a C40 youth council, so that these are youth that can network with each other globally, who can push their mayors together and have that kind of tension between, yes, we're happy to be your representatives and your advisors, but we're also going to be the ones pushing you to go further. And in Los Angeles, whether it's the oil wells in people's backyards or whether it's Pacoima and Watts and Boyle Heights, where youth have often led the neighborhood-based actions we have to take, I think that all world leaders need to have these, and I'd like to see them at the national level. Why couldn't we have White House Youth Council on environment, on climate change? And then finally, I'd say that it was really the youth that led Los Angeles to be the first big city in the world to declare a climate emergency. If we're not treating this the way we did COVID as a public health emergency, and hopefully the language that we've learned in the last year of tracking lives, cases, we have people who die whenever it gets hot in Los Angeles, understanding what fires and drought do, what floods do to our economy and to our people. we will miss the urgency of this moment. So I want to thank you for being part of that youth council, continuing to network that group. And I don't know when you time out of being young. I've always felt young my entire life, but I think at some point they say, okay, you're no longer a youth council leader. It's also to find and to lift up the youngest people coming after us. My daughter's 9, and I just talked to her about an hour ago as she was getting ready for school. And she said, Daddy, I miss you. I hope you come home. And I said, well, I'm here so that when you ask me years from now, what did you do, Dad? I could say I was there on the stage preparing it for you to come forward and to do this work too. So I think those are actionable ways that we can get youth involved through these councils. And then, by the way, one last thing is give them resources, not just like sit down and here's advice, but in the future, put them in as part of the budgeting that cities do and governments do so that youth can help make those decisions in a participatory way.
I could not agree more. Thank you so much for your leadership, helping elevate the voices of youth everywhere. And now I would love to turn things over to the president of the University of Southern California, Dr. Folt, to discuss the climate work that's going on at USC.
Thanks, Tianna.
Thank you.
Make sure I'm on mute. Thank you. Thanks again. I loved listening to that conversation. It's so exciting, and I think that universities can be very much like cities, of course, where we do so many things that are similar. And I think we can adopt, one of the things we have to do is be part of the solution that's broad, but we have to walk the walk at our own universities. We need to take our own, we have to say that we're going to turn sustainability into a community-wide effort. We have to be seeking to do the same sort of actions, our own race to zero. And I think what made me so excited when I came to USC is that I found within the minute I first mentioned sustainability, it was obvious that that was such a driving force from our students to our staff to our faculty. So somewhat like a youth council, I did start a presidential task force that includes students, staff, and faculty. They have been so active and have come up with so many great ideas. Tianna told you, of course, about Divest SC, but there are many, many things that they are doing. And I think what's so important is that the students are there. I mean, we have lots of excuses for inaction, but we need to make these better movements, and they're the people that are going to be living with the consequences of our inaction. So they bring that urgency. But I think, like Tianna says, she also always brings hope. And I thank her for that. I thank you, Mayor, for that too, because you very frequently remind us that we are able to do things. When I see that at USC, I see so many things. We have made such progress just in a few years. We have our own plans to look at carbon neutrality, 2028, 2030. We want to work at that. We want zero waste. We want to reduce all of our use of water. Many of these things have very specific actions, helping people get to campus without having to drive cars, finding ways to have a new urban tree initiative that we're working with the city that helps us plant thousands of trees to bring shade and clean air to urban heat zones, working on transportation, creating new devices that can do things through our research to reduce energy use. I mean, the list goes on. One thing I want to mention before I turn this into a question as well is that when you have students in so many areas, we've got 22 schools. I see it in the sciences, I see it in technology, I see it in communication, people working in all spheres. But what is a big movement is sustainability and the arts. And I think we are seeing the incredibly powerful voice that LA can have as the creative center in so many ways of the nation and the world, is the voices that they bring, the documentaries they create, the exhibits that they're putting forward. And we have an arts and climate collective at USC, and it funds entirely student-driven media projects that are designed to highlight community voices on pollution, food insecurity, and climate justice. And one of them, just produced by Jamie Lopez, who's a PhD student, looks very directly at how heavy industry is affecting the health of 2 Southeast LA communities and how local leaders in government and business, bringing our panel together, are all really addressing it. So I think if we start with ourselves and walk the walk, we can do a lot. But my question to you is, given the city of LA, we've got business leaders and people from all the universities there. We have such close partnerships, and we can make a difference, as you say. But when you look at sustainability, what are the ways that you think that we can put that on warp speed and bring our academic institutions and partners together to help lead that real fight to slow climate change?
Well, thank you, Dr. Folt. I've loved working with you, and I've loved that your background is in this work. You timed your career perfectly. So I think many of us that have worked in this space for so long, it was a lonely space for a long time. It is now the space and the challenge of our lifetimes. So not only does every city need to ask itself this question, every university institution needs to. And USC is lucky to have an environmental leader who also happens to be their president in you. And I've seen how you approach this from a public health perspective. Even the work that we did together during the COVID crisis has emphasized that USC is a thinker, a trainer, and a doer. Whether it was setting up vaccination sites that we had together, or whether it was just looking at the research around, some of the early ways we could test, you have been really an awesome, awesome partner. And I think it's the same when it comes to this work. First and foremost, there's this gap between, I think, thought and action. And so you have people who are thinkers, but they don't know what it's like to act in the real world. Sometimes those thinkers are academics, sometimes they're activists, and they're like, well, I read something, or I'm producing one kind of laboratory produced example where we could just change our power system to X. Then doers look at this and say, whoa, 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 my responsibility is that the hospital machines work tomorrow, that when people turn on their power, it functions, and that everything from electric vehicles to, the pumps that pump water in so that we can have drinking water actually function. And you don't have a lot of people who translate in between. I think universities, in conjunction with cities at their best, become those bridge builders. So first, I think it's looking at the ways that we can research what is possible. So, I look at the LA 100 study, which was an example of going to academics with our National Renewable Energy Lab and university partners like yourself and asking those questions. Okay, we know it's possible, but what does this actually cost? What is the timeline actually like? What are the sacrifices that have to be made? How risky and disruptive could this be? And after 10 million supercomputer simulations, we saw that we could get 97% of the way there to be carbon free by the end of this decade. Every time I say that, it gives me chills, because it is so exciting when other cities say that. They go, whoa, 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 wait a second. And I say, just go read the study. I don't have to say it's a politician's promise. Second, though, you're educating that next generation, not just of climate scientists and researchers, but of engineers, of thought leaders, of future political leaders, I think, to advance this work and to incorporate sustainability into everything. When I became mayor, I put out an executive directive that said sustainability is no longer just the responsibility of water and power, sanitation, transportation, and our parks. All 40 of you as department heads, from the police chief to the port director, I'm going to be judging you every year on what you're doing. And I can never forget in one of my cabinet meetings when the police chief said, hey, we finally double-sided paper and electronized that, and they quantified how many trees they had saved. And that was part of his weekly report along with the crime statistics. And I said, now we're getting somewhere. And so as USC can continue to train folks to incorporate this as a prism into every profession, not just the schools that specialize in that, I think is really important. And human capital outside the university, training people for the jobs, for the building trades, for the the engineers, the people who will come through and build 15 rail lines, who will help us make sure that water and power continues to be here. Continue training those folks for the green jobs that we're seeing just flood into Los Angeles. And then third, I think you alluded to this, walk the walk. And while you say those years right now, Dr. Folt, I hope, like I have tried to do, you will give the best pledge each year you think is realistic for that year, but the next year examine whether that can be moved forward. I hope the whole world does that, because what seems bold today is usually timid tomorrow when it comes to climate change and implementation. So whether it's your plants, whether it's your footprint, whether it's the way your students get around, we all have to do those micro, midi, and macro actions to make sure that happens. So I think that the magnitude of this crisis, we're so lucky to have 3 top 25 universities in our city, the only city in the world that has that. And each one of them brings amazing brilliance to it. But I think USC in particular, in a communities of color, can bring the equity lens along with those other 3 things. So I hope that's useful. And I know I have to run off too, but I want to just thank LABC. Thank you, Dr. Folt. Thank you, Mary and Tianna for this entire thing. There's a much smarter person who I think might be able to stay on. If I say anything intelligent, it's because Lauren Faber O'Connor has trained me well as our city's chief sustainability officer, and our entire team here, who is just so incredibly well represented, from Julie Chardulo to our department heads. But thank you. Know that LA is strong here. Excuse the bad lighting. I just wanted you guys to see a little bit of Glasgow out the window there. So have a great afternoon, or morning, I guess, for you all. And we'll see you soon, hopefully with even stronger reports from Glasgow.
Well, Mayor, we thank you for doing this morning, taking the time to share with us what's going on there. And we look forward to having you back. Travel safe, be safe.
Thank you. All right. We'll see you soon. Bye, everyone.
Well, I think he said it all. This is really, how we have been messaging, everything that we're doing here. And it's really all about taking all the work that the business community, our young people, the leaders of today and tomorrow, and of course, our universities, demonstrating that this is a true coalition, and also demonstrating that, one of the things the mayor has said to breathe sort of hope into this discussion is that while one country so far in the world is on track, has submitted a plan that is consistent with the ambition that we need to see, that's the Gambia, which represents 0.0005% of global emissions. 2/3 of C40 cities have done so. And that's not to shame anybody. That is really to provide the inspiration and the reminder that countries are made up of cities, and that together, and all of the parts that make up cities are what really do provide that ambition and the ability to make those, to really put yourself out there and to say, these are the commitments that we're going to make, and this is what needs to happen, and we're doing it as a coalition. So you all represent that, and everyone who's chiming in the audience who's joined it's so incredibly exciting to see everyone's support, and we're really grateful because the mayor would not be able to represent global cities and Los Angeles the way he has if it wasn't for all of you.
Well, Lauren, thank you very much. And Dr. Folt, thank you, and Tianna. We're looking forward to our partnership, Dr. Folt, with you next year, I hope, for our 3rd annual Sustainability Summit, where we will problem solve with Tianna and Lauren and the mayor, all those nitty gritty details of what it takes to be successful. Tianna, hopefully with a lot of young leaders present, and that hope that we will definitely get to this goal that the city and the mayor have set for us. So with that, Lauren, have a good day. I know that you're going to be there a couple more days, and we really appreciate that you took the time. We would have preferred to be with you, but where does COP go next? Where does Cop27 go?
Egypt.
Okay, so we'll see you then. Is it Cairo?
No, it is not Cairo, but I don't remember where it is.
Okay, fine. And is that 4 years from now?
It's next year.
Oh, it's next year. So
every year. It's every year. So it is time. It is time for us to really, as President Folt said, come on, where are we? Let's do this. That is the message of COP26.
Well, good. Well, perhaps we can celebrate COP27 with a whole new list of achievements from 2022 to share. Yeah, because I think we are accelerating and we have picked up the pace, and we need to, because everybody has to agree. And I think the climate's helped, because it's not like you can't see it anymore. You can see it. You can feel it. It's not theoretical any longer. It's quite real. So.
And that was really what was beautiful about the Paris Agreement was that everyone stopped sort of pointing fingers and stopped saying whose responsibility. And now that Glasgow is really the follow-on from the Paris Agreement to say we've all recognized everyone has a role to play, And now we have to up that ambition consistent with the science. And that, that pressure is very high here.
Yeah. Tianna, Dr. Folt, would you like to, any final word?
I just want to say thank you. It was great to be here. And this kind of silly thing keeps going through my head, but last year was all about PPE, and this climate is all about PPP, the public-private partnerships. But the truth is, that is the key. And this was a wonderful event. It just reinforced for me how important that PPP is. So I think
get home and work on that. Exactly.
We're going to do that.
Yeah. Tianna, any final thought?
I also want to echo Dr. Folt's statement to just say thank you so much for having me. I think it's wonderful, actually, that people like myself, people who have been invited to Cop26, the summit that happened in Milan, use actually asking for more meaningful participation. It really is an amazing time that we're living through, and I hope that we come out of Cop26 with plans that are going to change the world for the better.
Yeah. Or at least an agreement that that there is a plan. Okay. All right. On that, I think we should thank you and have a good day. And we look forward to seeing you all soon.
Thank you.